We are really, as I started last week, into, I would call it the Yosef saga. And maybe that should have been the umbrella topic and theme for a number of these classes that I'll be giving during these weeks. We started with the Yosef saga last week, and I shared with you, I hope, the feeling of what did Ira Gershman say? It ain't necessarily so. What we've been learning and what we have taken as also an assumption of the story of Yosef and his brothers, the text doesn't seem to really reflect that. And I'm not going to go over what we had gone through last week completely. I understand that it's on the website, I think, right? You can, which I did. I knew that they were doing this for a reason. I didn't realize that and I had forgotten that. That's why this week I make sure to brush my scalp. But anyway, I wanted to see look good. I'm going to review quickly some of the main points that I made last week. Those who want the source sheet that I gave out, and don't have any more, I'm going to just keep it over here so that you can take whatever you want over here. And I'm going to start somewhat in the middle of what I was saying, but reviewing what happened before. And I really didn't come to an end, because what I really haven't touched upon is, all right, Rabbi Winkler, so what, all the rabbis are wrong. Of course, I can say, yeah, but the text is wrong. But I want to explain to you the approach of chazal and why they seem to have given almost a forced explanation that is not really directly clear in the text. Why would they do that and take a negative approach to this? It's almost painful when one thinks about it. So we'll touch upon that. But just let me start toward the end of what I was saying last week, and thereby review some of the points that we made. In the end, the approach that I used, not mine, of course. We find it among, unfortunately, Loe's, and I believe it's the Barbanel, and I believe also certainly the Ibn Ezra, that the truth was that the brothers were completely unaware of what happened to Yosef. That, as the text says, he was taken out of the pit by the Midyanim. They took him out. They took Yosef to the Ishmaelim and sold him to them. And the Ishmaelim, the international traders, as I said, brought him down to Mitzrayim, where he was sold as a slave. The problems that are really truly difficult, according to the view that we have learned from chazal, are really put aside with this approach. By saying this, we understand that the brothers were not guilty of selling Yosef, that they were totally unaware that he was taken down to Egypt, which is why they were so shocked and unable to recognize him when they came there, and that they weren't lying when they went to their father and said, even dipping the coat in the blood, to tell the father that Yosef had been killed by an animal, and in order for the father to come to grips with a terrible tragedy, in order to once again rebuild his life after he accepted that this is what happened. And as I spoke to you about, we psychologists say it also, chazal saw it too, that unless you are completely committed to that the death has happened, that you can't start your grieving part. You can't really get over it. They always think that, well, he's still alive. And Chazal say that, by the way, in their Perush, they said that Yaakov said I will never go. I will die still mourning for my son. And the chazal say because deep inside he still didn't believe this happened, and therefore he could not yet start his grieving or not be again comforted from it. At any rate, those are the reasons, the approaches that would make the story a lot more understandable to a certain degree. But there's also a lot of irony in the approach when one thinks about it. For example, the original plans of the brothers when they first see Yosef coming from afar was the first things out of their mouth is what we have. Let's take him and throw him into a pit. V'amarnu chaya ra'a achalasu. And then we can say, we'll just say and assume, amar, and I won't go through too many, it means we will say, true, but often amar also means to think, not just to say something. And when it says, Vayomer Hashem Yehi Or, it doesn't mean he said, let there be light, although it's nice to think. He merely had the thought of that. God can think. Hu Amar Vayehi. God thinks and it occurs. There's no matter of having to, go to the judge and say, can I have a thing? Thought. That's why I offered, what does it say throughout the Torah? Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, Lemor. Why do we need Vayomer Lemor? And he said to say, because Vayomer is almost like the idea came into his mouth and then he expressed it. Anyway, so they thought, and here they said to each other, we'll say, we're going to, well, tell him that he was devoured by a wild beast. And what exactly happened? They thought that he was devoured by a beast, not knowing that what they said before had come true. It didn't. They thought it did. Watch your words, what you're going to say. You never know what's going to happen. So that was interesting also. And so what they thought was the truth really wasn't the truth. But it also helps, I think I may have mentioned this last week, but it's okay to repeat, that not only were they not really slave traders of the father, but anyway, later on, when they are accused of being spies, and then they find then Shimon is taken into prison, and then they go home and they open up their satchels that they had purchased in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, only to find out that their money had been returned to them, and they fear now that they would be accused of having stolen it. And so they said, "Oy vey, what's happening to us?" And I said, and it says, and the quote is, I think I have it here, Aval Ashemim Anachnu. They said to each other that indeed we are guilty al achinu, over what happened to our brother. What was it that they were guilty about? And they say the following. Here, it's at the bottom of the page, on page 2, on number 4. See there? And they said to one another, the final, it says, we are guilty over our brother in that we saw his distress when he pleaded with us. No, from the pit. But we didn't answer. We did not listen to him. Yeah? Right, so this is what I said to you last week also. And he said, and Reuven responds by saying, Hello, amarti alechem lemor. Well, didn't I tell you way back when we threw him into the pit, before we threw him in, didn't I tell you, Al techetu b'yeled, don't sin against the child, and you didn't listen to me? The gam damav hinei, and now his blood is being paid back, is basically what it said. So there are two important facts to support the idea that of their complete lack of knowledge, and the fact that they never did sell him. Lack of knowledge of what happened to Yosef, and that they did not sell him. Number one, if they're going to say that they're being punished for a terrible crime, and they say the terrible crime is not that we sold our brother as a slave, but that, he tried to get us out of the pit and we didn't. V'gam, and then it says, and Reuven says, I told you shouldn't have done that. And v'gam damo hine, and here his blood now is being paid back. What do you mean his blood? If they had sold him as a slave, what would they say his blood? His blood means his death. We're being paid for his death. They thought he was dead. So there's the proof that this is really what was happening. So I will not go through more than this, because I really did, in my excitement to get on, I included one of the things that I have in my notes to keep to the end. It's a problem I have, a mind that's afraid of forgetting things, and a mouth that keeps on going on. The two, not a good thing. But I will tell you this, and this is going to touch on this thing. Given that this is what happened, okay? As I pointed out last time, if indeed they never sold him, why, when Yosef identifies who he truly is, and they said, "Oh my God, he's crying," and he said, "Don't worry, I'll take. Don't get so upset." He says, "He says, he said, the fact that you sold me, it's okay. That's what he said. Now, Winkler, if you're telling me that they didn't sell him, why did he say that it's selling me here? And as I would explain, and I'll do again, that's exactly what he thought. They never did. But he was pulled up by Midianites. Well, how did the Midianites know he was there? Why would they do? Let's go to a pit and find somebody. No, the logic is he was screaming and yelling to get out.
He was screaming.
That's right. That's what made them hit. But as Yosef think, but how would they have known which pit to look in? Wow, what do they know? My brothers who threw me into a pit. Why would they throw me into a pit? In order to get people to sell me, in order to sell me as a slave. So again, the story as seen by Yosef was totally different than the story as seen by the brothers. This is a great story of complete miscommunication, of the lack of knowledge of what happens when you start sticking around with God. This is exactly what happened. So they think he's dead. They didn't mean him to die because they were going to just sell him. So now they think he's dead. Going though, they really did. He was really sold. He, on the other hand, says, I'm sold down here. Now, I pointed on this last time, and I don't know how well I made this point. Yosef had a very complete belief that his sale was not given by them, but he was sold because the brothers told the Midianites. So he said, you sold me, you probably got the money. So he believes that he was now sold by his brothers. And why? Again, as I told you last week, when he first asks, well, where's Papa? Why didn't he come to look for me? Where is my brother? Why would they let me here? He starts thinking, well, who was the first one to send me to my brothers who hated me when I'm all by myself and there are 9 of them, or 10 of them? How come he sent me there? Was he not part of this whole thing? And if he's not looking for me, that's when he starts to think, well, maybe that was it. And why would he think so? Remember I said it last week? Because everyone from TORAH down had more than one son, and only one was chosen. TORAH only had the only chosen one from TORAH was Avram, not Nachor or Haran. Aaron was dead, which was tough to choose him. But anyway, so that was there. Then you had Abraham had both Yitzchak and Ishmael, but Ishmael was not chosen, only Yitzchak was. And Yitzchak had Esav and Yaakov, but Esav was not chosen, only Yaakov was. Now comes Yaakov with many sons, and Yosef said, who's the one who's not going to be chosen? And I guess it's me. And that's why, and I know I'm repeating myself and I apologize, but not so much. And that's why that is why Yosef decides, I'm going to make it big here in Mitzrayim. I'm going to make it here. If I can't make it, and indeed he does. Think about it. Yosef makes it big in Beit Potiphar, doesn't he? Becomes the head of it. And he's thrown into jail and makes it big in the Beit Sohar, right? And even in Beit Paro, he gets higher and higher. The only Beit he wasn't accepted into was Beit Israel. That's what he sees, and that's what he feels, and who could blame him? And that's what's going through his mind. So when he sees them, he says, but don't worry, I see that everything God has done for me, and that's not your fault, God has done it. That's what he says very clearly. But he does say, that's why he says it, and that's what he was thinking about at the time. And that is why, remember I said to you last week also, when he has his sons, he calls his first son Menashe, from the word Nashani, you help me forget. And what does he help forget? Ki Nashani Elokim et kol amali ve'et kol beit avi. God has helped me forget all my difficult times here, and he allowed me to forget my family. Beit Avi, it's my family. And he's thanking God by naming his son Menashe. He's going to forget. He has to forget Beit Yisrael. He wasn't accepted. He'll make it in Beit Paro. That's what it has to be. It has to be. He believes in God. And yet he feels that was the fate. And that's what now we understand. Things fall into place. His father never rejected him. He's still part of the family, and so on and so forth. And then we might very likely ask, what is it, therefore, that took away my notes that I needed? But I just want to see if it's right. Yeah. It helps us understand also. Let's see. Yeah. I know it's here someplace, but fortunately it's in my head. We begin to understand now what is it that made Yosef break and collapse almost when his brother Yehuda comes and when Yosef comes, when Binyamin comes to see Yosef, and when Yehuda comes. But let's just start up what Yehuda says here. And what Yosef. When the second time, when the brothers come back with Binyamin, his baby brother, right? Now, Binyamin was more than just a few years younger than he was, because he was born after they left the house of Lavan on the way back, at least 8 years, if not a little more, after the birth of Yosef. So Binyamin was a good 8, maybe 9 years younger than Yosef. So when Yosef was 17 years old, Binyamin may have been 8. You have very little, connection there. Sometimes when you think about this and you look at the years, you begin to appreciate the story even more. It's very emotional here. And because it sounds very strange, for example, when he calls, bring the Na'ar of Binyamin back. Now he is 37 at this point, means Binyamin is 30 years old. And Binyamin comes and says, Tatala. He's 30 years old, but he's still a nar. My mother called me the baby till I think I had 3 kids. I was always the baby of the family. My aunt, who had a wonderful sense of humor, used to tell the story that she was very close to my mother, 2 sisters, and they lived around the corner. And she used to go crazy whenever my mother would introduce her. Have you seen my baby? I was the youngest one in the family. I had 3 older sisters, so I certainly suffered. And she said, did you see the baby, my baby? So and my aunt would say, so in came this 6-foot guy coming over there, and they said, the baby is here. But it doesn't matter. The youngest one is often still called baby. I'm sure you have it in your family. If you don't, I'm sorry. But it's happened. It's not an uncommon thing. He's the baby of the family. So here he is. He's 30 years old when Binyamin comes. Either way, there's a tremendous amount missing. Remember, this is his baby brother. It really was his baby brother. How much time did he have with this little brother? They no longer had. So here comes Binyamin, right? And when Yosef sees him, he breaks down. He breaks down. It says he starts crying, and he finally gets over it, and he comes back. But why is this true? Why eventually, when Yehuda comes, you know the story. Yosef plans to keep Binyamin with him, and everybody else would go home. And that was his plan. What broke it? He had planned to have Binyamin with him, have a little one-on-one time with him. He hadn't met him that well, wanted to know what's happening at home. He wants to know how his father really is. This is his one and only full brother. Remember that. The others were half-brothers. He's the only one with the same father and the same mother. So his plan was, that's why he planned to have him, he plants the golden cup into his satchel, has him taken by himself. V'atem alu l'shalom al abichem, he tells it the final words of Parshat Miketz, and you go home, but I'm keeping the young one, I'm Binyamin. So he breaks down after that. Well, he had a great plan, He maybe wanted to find what was happening over the years, these 22 years that he wasn't there in the family. What happened was simple 2 phrases that Yehuda mentions. By the way, I'm going to have a separate class about that whole Yehuda speech as to a number of reasons what made Yosef break down and finally admit whom he was. But I think one of the most powerful ones are 2 phrases that Yehuda says when he pleads with Yosef, or as he knows him there, the great Avrech of Mitzrayim. So what does he say? 2 things. Yehuda plans and talks about the years that had gone by and the promises he made to his father to bring home Binyamin safely. And of course, he then says, I will now take his place if you'll allow me to. There are 2 things that he says in this very moving soliloquy, which we read at the very beginning of Parshat Vayigash. He goes through the story and he says, among other things, he said, I came back home and I wanted to take, as you commanded us to bring Binyamin, our youngest brother, back with you. And when I told my father of what the plan is, my father said at first, no, you cannot go. Because the achiv mate, his only one brother is dead. And therefore I will not let him go. And Yosef says, what? My father all of these years thought I was dead? Just as I've been saying to you that he thought I was dead. That must have broken his heart, Yosef. So Papa didn't just abandon me. He didn't decide I'm not going to be part of the family. He thinks I'm dead. And then another thing he says, it's about the same idea. He said, I had Atemidatem Kishnayim Yoldali Ishti. You know, the father said to Yehuda, as Yehuda now tells it to Yosef, Kishnayim Yoldali Ishti, that my wife, who is that wife? Rachel. Interesting. My wife was just Rachel. And this is Yehuda, the son of Leah, who knows clearly that his father sees his Rachel as his main wife, because that's the one he wanted to marry in the first place. It says, when my father said, and it says there that Kishnayim Yom, my wife has given birth to two sons. And one just disappeared. Va'omar, and I thought I understood, ach tarov taraf. He was killed by an animal. V'lo re'iti barhena, so I haven't seen him since then. So those are the two things that Yosef hears when he finds out what was happening at home, which he never knew before, that the father thought he was gone and dead. That's what had it break down. That was the breakdown. And that's why, of course, he does finally admit and tell people who he was. Took off the Superman cape and showed them there's Clark Kent, right? That's what basically happened. That is the, I think the important thing of understanding some of the sources and some of the proofs, can I say, I think support to the idea, to this approach towards what was happening, the real story. Now I have to ask, and I have to really explain, so why do chazal, why do they paint us a different picture? It always hurt me. I was very sensitive to this. And why do you say that? Why do you think the worst of things? We're always told you have to always judge someone always positively, right? It says in Perek also that you should have a done of the kav zechut. So why would Chazal, of all people, only look to the negative of this? I believe that. Now, many people say, well, you have it says in the Haftorah of Yosef, al mechram ba'kesav tzaddik, because the people of the time, they sell the righteous and the innocent for money. And they say, it refers to Yosef, which of course it does not mean that, because Amos was not who said this, was talking to the people of the time, not to that. I think Chazal, although they see this as a connection, that it might, whether the Navi meant it to talk about Yosef, or whether it now applied to Yosef, you should think about that. I think it's important to know that Chazal had another reason why they should condemn the brothers when they had no need to, seemingly. Why did they look at the negative? And I think it's a very simple truth. They treat this story, the story of the brothers, so severely because even the intent that they had to do, they wanted to kill their brother. Whether or not they accomplished that or not, I would say it's more than a chutzpah. What, do you expect to say, you're a great guy? Okay, you didn't do it. I mean, you tried to, but that's okay. You got away with it. Chazal just couldn't imagine this. Couldn't imagine this. They wanted to see the negative events that occurred because of what this happens, which is what we'll get into soon also. How would they even think of causing such a horrible pain to their father? Reuven comes and says, when he can't find Yosef in the pit, right? And he says, "V'ani ana niva, Yosef enenu. Yosef isn't here. What am I going to do?" Well, why didn't you think about that before? Why didn't everybody think of that before? All these plans of what they're going to do for Yosef, and nobody stood up. Reuben can only say, "Oh, I'll save him. No one will know." What do you mean no one will know? Get up there, "Hishtagatem," as we'd say in English. What are you, nuts? You hate him, fine. What are you going to tell the dad? What are you going to tell Papa? You're going to tell Papa, "Oh, we killed him because we didn't like him." What are you going to tell him? And nobody stood up for that. The idea that you even had an intent to do that to Yosef, and a total lack of care of your elderly father, and what he would do, and the insensitivity to the entire family. You didn't think of that. And the chazal say, we're going to take the negative part of this and see the worst part. Yeah, they did this and they did that. Even though the text may not say that. That's how they felt. And I told you this last time also. The very fact that vayeshvu le'achol lechem, that he's thrown into a pit. There may be a tiger or panther, somebody coming down there any minute. He can't climb out. And he's help, screaming, their brother. And they said, we're going to have lunch. And they sat to have lunch. They said, vayeshvu le'achol lechem, and while they were eating, somebody else came and the Midyanim took him out. How insensitive can you be? Is your hatred so great? Most of the brothers are within a few years of him, a year older, 2 years older. How do you treat your brother that way? My God. How much? Chazal see that. And we should as well, I suppose. The callousness, the callous treatment to your brother, it's unthinkable. And Chazal wanted to teach us a lesson. And so they do so by refusing to make light of the situation. And yes, sure, maybe the brothers didn't sell Yosef, but their actions are comparable. The consequences of what happened was the same as having him sold, even if maybe they didn't sell him. Almost consequences of death, at least for 22 years for the father and for them. And therefore, you understand that Hashem judges people's actions in different ways. I know it's hard for us to accept, but that's how it is. I have for so long been teaching people, I've taught people, that in my understanding, and I could be wrong, I remember a couple of years ago was wrong, so I thought I made a mistake. Anyway, there is a reason God doesn't treat somebody who was brought up in a wonderful home, a warm home, went to yeshiva, and learned Torah, and then goes out on his own and behaves wildly and totally forgets and marries somebody who's not Jewish and does terrible things. He is judged, I believe, very differently from the same person the same age who was brought up in a home that never knew Torah, that was not religious at all, that maybe even had one of the parents, let's say the father, so that he could still be Jewish, this guy, not Jewish. And then he goes out and he's a nice fellow, and maybe he even learned about it, and maybe he may have at first married a non-Jew. Is God punishing the second one as much as he would the first one? Oh, they do the same thing. They're both married non-Jewish spouses. There's a difference. God judges you according to what your potential is and what your background was. The expectation of one who has been given by parents a wonderful home and a wonderful education and a wonderful religious backbone to turn there, that's one thing, very different than one who never had that background. And that's why when Chazal say that B'mkom shavet tshuva Omdim, wherever Chozrim B'Tshuva, when they stand, the purest of saints can't stand there. He has changed his life completely. The others didn't have to. So the same thing here. There are some sins of passion, and they treat it as that. And some are sins that were carefully planned, when you plan evil deeds, and they will be treated so as well. Certain actions might be regarded as acceptable to most people. But for the righteous sons of the saintly Father, for those who would form the holy nation, such actions would be judged very severely. Chazal wanted us to understand that. Tzaddikim are held to a higher standard. And our rabbis teach us. And they teach us that through their approach to Yosef and the brothers. I finished last week's class. Yeah.
Does anybody address the fact that Yaakov gave a coat to one of his sons and partially or somewhat caused jealousy? How
Yeah.
does Chazal
Yes.
address that?
Well, you asked me, does somebody do? And the answer is yes. Now you want me to know how they did. No. We find...
He becomes jealous. We got 12 brothers there. They picked him. Something must have happened along the way that he was special in the eyes of their father.
Okay. Now, well, look, again, this is all part of the first class, but that's okay. I'm going to have to change the title of this one, if that's okay with you, because I already gave you a different one. Listen, you have to understand what was the importance of a special coat. I think I said it last week. Yeah. It was clearly that an act, not only an act, it was an act of the fact that he was telling his brothers, this is the next one. He is my successor, because he was the eldest. Reuben says, oh, let me just see. I just checked my birth certificate. I got 7 years on him. No. But to him, the eldest was the eldest of his wife. And his wife was primarily Rachel. He didn't work in Lavan's house for Leah. He worked for Rachel, and then Lavan, being the great guy that he was, had him marry Leah and let him marry Rachel only after another 7 years of work. So as far as he was concerned, he's a nice guy, he married Leah, he had children with her, but his love and his real wife was Rachel. And as I told you, Yehuda recognizes that. He quotes his father who says, Yod Ali Ishti, my wife said this and that. It was clear. And it wasn't an unnatural thing. It was fairly common in the ancient world. You had two wives, you would choose. The Torah wouldn't let you do that. Right? The Torah in Kitetze said, if one has two wives, the one is preferred over the other, you may not give the birthright, the Bechorah, to the beloved one if he's not the Bechorah. The Bechorah goes to the first child of a wife, not the wife that you like better. It was clearly, I can go through all those psukim now, but it was basically shouting at Yaakov. He's saying, God don't allow that, you don't do that. Look what it did to a family. Right. It destroyed the family. Yes. So Chazal do say that, yeah.
Even Laban says that in our place we don't choose the younger over the older when he gives him Leah rather than Rachel.
Okay, but that you're right. It's, that one, it was a shtoch. You'll excuse my nice Hebrew. He gave a shtoch. Yaakov comes and he tells rather naively the whole story of his life when he was in with his parents and what happened with the bracha that he took, and he got the bechorah, he got the whitelist, which by the way is not also, this was a legal thing. Bechorah wasn't just, well, when you were born first. It was you're wearing the cloak, it's the same thing, of birthright. You are the next in line. So that's what it was. And so it could be sold, which is what Esav did. And the words in the beginning of Toldot is very clear that when he came back hungry from his hunt, Esav, he says, "Halitenu na min ha'adom hazeh ki anef anochi." I'm tired, which also means I'm thirsty, by the way. He asked Yaakov, who was the chef in the kitchen, he said, Halitenu la. La'ot is almost like pour it down my throat. It's not even to eat. The haliteni with an ayin is a very strange thing, but we have it la'at. It was a forced feeding. Haliteni, pour down my throat. Yeah, this red stuff, which was lentil soup. That's chazal. Yeah. Obviously, he had a little lentil problem. Anyway, so he put the ki ayof anochi, and he said, and Yaakov says, okay. Then sell your birthright to me. And what does he respond? He said, I'm about to die. He says, I feel like I'm going to die. What do I need a birthright for? And then the Torah goes on and says, fine. So he gave him what he wanted. Vayokam vayelach, it's a vayivez Esav habachora, and he set aside. He despised the bechorah. He didn't care about it. So it was a real sale. That's true. But when he comes and tells a story to Lavan keeps it in there. Puts it in his diary. And when it came time to, he says exactly the words you said. When he finds out that, when Yaakov finds out he was given Leah and not Rachel, he said, well, what did you do to me? Hello, Rachel, I've worked for Rachel. What did you trick me? And he says the words that are so powerful. You see, it's amazing what you learn when you read the Torah. It says that in the Chumash. Yeah. They had made color books about this, but He says, Lo yaseh kacha. Such and says, in our place, we don't do something like this. To give over the younger in front of the. I don't know what to do in your place with this bechorah and who's older, who's not. But in this place, we show respect, and we would not let the younger marry before the older. That little shtach, when he says that, such a thing isn't done in our place. To give and what the crucial part about this, I can keep on. This crucial point of this is that the whole time it refers to Rachel as Gedolah and Yosef and Rachel as the Ketana. For the first time is it referred to not as the bigger and the smaller, but as the older and the younger, the Bechor and Sa'ir, which is exactly what happened with Yaakov and with Esav. So it's clear that the text of the Torah is showing what's going on here. So yeah, that's exactly what happened. It destroys the family, 100%. Now what we're going to do, in the wonderful 5 minutes I have left, is wonder why it took us so long to finish the first thing. No, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do now. As I told you, there will be 3 sections of the Joseph saga. And section 2 that I was going to start today, but I forgot that I talked too much, is the second section I'll be doing that I had given the title, that there might be some I have to change that title. It would be the brothers' mission to Egypt. The brothers made 2 trips to Egypt to get the necessary provisions during the famine. I'm going to show you the 2 trips, the differences and the comparisons and the contrast of the 2. What was the reason for going? What happened? And we're going to see in the wording of the Tanakh, we're going to see within the Torah, it says some fascinating things that we would not ordinarily had seen. It opens your eyes. And that's why, like I said, I love to be able to show you things that we ordinarily, upon just looking at or working, we wouldn't necessarily say, I see that. Many things we do. Some things, and these are a little more subtle. Was my what was it, a 12-year-old to subtle, this subtle, very subtle wording the Torah uses to suddenly put together two things, and almost as if to give you a jab. Remember that? Chazal see it all the time. Chazal were brilliant that way to see a different phrase, a different thing used elsewhere. And they said, well, wait a minute, maybe, I could, just quickly, I won't have time anyway. So when you look at the book of Shmuel Bet, and you see there, Perak Yud Gimel Bet, Shmuel Bet, the story of Tamar and Amnon. Amnon being the son of David, Tamar his sister or half-sister, or stepsister, to the chazal, and discussed it with Meforshim. And he rapes her. And the wording there in the whole story is almost exact as the story of the rape of Dinah, of Yaakov's daughter, and in Shechem. And unless you know that, you're familiar with that, you could reading this and know that, but when you read it, the few people who read Shmuel, but if you do reading that, you'll hear those phrases and you say, Tanakh is telling me something. Yeah, it's telling you something. Which then opens up the thing of, can we compare the two events? Which was worse? Which was better? And I'll give you a hint. Amnon was much worse. But I won't tell you that now. Maybe we'll get to that also. At any rate, we have to stop at 12:15 officially, and since it's 12:13, I'll give you 2.5 minutes to take a drink.
12:11, and you didn't start on time either.
No wonder I was late to shul today. It's 12:12. I was just here 12:13. I figured I left this morning. I said, I'm fine. All of a sudden, I said, somebody jumped the clock in the shul. No, they did. My watch wasn't right. So I was a minute late. I wasn't. I got in shul on time anyway, but none I'd like to get a little more beforehand so I finished this 12:12. At any rate, have a wonderful Shabbos.